for having me this morning.
Thank you.
Good morning to our cherished viewers and our listeners. This morning we are talking about methods of teaching. Specifically, we are supposed to treat types of teaching methods. It will be good if we situate it within a proper context. So we will begin from somewhere and then continue from that angle. And so this morning, all that we are looking at is, as a teacher, what approach do you use in teaching? As a teacher, what approach do you use in teaching? So when we say methods of teaching, we are just looking at a teacher's approach to teaching. A teacher's approach to teaching. And so we will say that generally it is the procedure in which we structure our classroom activities. It is the procedure in which we structure our classroom activities. So all the things that we do as teachers the moment we enter the classroom is what we refer to as methods of teaching. So it set the guidelines for the pattern of behavior that the teacher expects from the learners in the course of teaching and learning process. And so the moment you enter the class, there are two things that you must do. It's either the focus of the lesson will be on the teacher or it will be on the learner. And that is why when it comes to methods of teaching, we have only two. We have teacher-centered method and learner-centered method. There are some instances that we hear people saying that, as for me, I use this discussion method. No, discussion cannot be a method. We have only two methods of teaching: teacher-centeredness and learner-centeredness. In other words, it's either you are going to focus on your learners or you hijack the class so that most of the things will be done by you as a teacher. We shouldn't forget that in this new curriculum dispensation, teachers have the opportunity to decide. Before this time, teachers were the focal point of every teaching. But currently, as we speak, teachers are supposed to use their students as vehicles for transmitting knowledge. And that is where the learner-centeredness come in. Either way, it's not bad. So we shouldn't say that, once you are teacher-centered, it means it's bad. No. There are instances where the teacher is supposed to use teacher-centeredness, and there are instances where the teacher has to use learner-centeredness. We sometimes, as educators, feel that once somebody is using the learner-centered approach, it means he's the best teacher. No. Or while somebody is using the teacher-centered method, it means he's a bad teacher. No. It depends on whatever you've planned to do with your students. Now, from methods, we come to techniques. And so techniques of teaching refers to the specific activities that we perform while using a method of teaching. So you may say you are going to use teacher-centered method or learner-centered method. That's fine. But what exactly are you going to do with your students? Are you going to group them? Are you going to pair them? Are you going to take them to a field or what? Each of these that I've mentioned, they are techniques. So once we choose a particular method, there are techniques that we have to employ within that specific method. And so there are different techniques to be considered when a teacher is using a particular method of teaching. So for instance, when you decide to do lecture, question and answer, group discussion, whether small or high, or it depends on the size of the class anyway. Role play, demonstration, and all that. These are techniques, but the technique is always embedded in the method of teaching. The techniques are always embedded in the methods of teaching. So, assuming you say you want to use teacher-centeredness or you want to use learner-centered method, what specific things are you going to do with your students? And that is where techniques of teaching comes in. So as for techniques, we can have thousands and thousands of techniques. It's only methods of teaching that we've said we have only two methods. We have teacher-centered method and learner-centered method. For techniques, I'm not sure we can teach you all the techniques that you need to know for your classroom. No. Because you can have series and series of techniques from a whole class discussion, as I said, to think, pair, share, to war, mount, to whatever. We can have series and series of techniques, but each of the techniques that we have mentioned is always embedded in a method. So the method is the general pattern that teachers use to realize their objectives or to achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. Now, so you have your method, whether teacher-centered or learner-centered. Then comes your technique. Now, the technique, as we said, it can be lecture, group discussion, and field trip and all that, or role play, demonstration and all that. These are techniques. Now, whenever you choose any technique, you need to deduce a strategy. So, for instance, you say that, okay, I'm going to use the learner-centered method of teaching. And here, I'll pair the students. But what if you go to the class and some students are saying, me, I don't want to join this person? What do? You need to have a strategy. So the strategy is the sequencing and manipulation of the chosen techniques and or their activities during a lesson. So at every point in time, teachers need to have their method, they need to have their technique. Then out of this technique, they will now have to choose a particular strategy. The strategy is very important. So if a teacher decides to use learner-centered method of teaching to teach a particular topic, they would also need to select a combination of techniques such as case study, role play, small group discussion, brainstorming, demonstration, nature walk, and so on. The teacher then needs to strategize. So the strategy is more or less like the tactics that the teacher will use to achieve the technique and achieve the method. So methods are always general. Out of the methods, we get our techniques, and then out of our techniques, we need to have strategies. Because, like I said earlier, if a student decides that you are pairing me with this person, but I won't avail myself, what do you do as a teacher? You need to be strategic. So that you must strategize in every time. There are instances you go to a class, majority of the students are far older than you are. You have chosen your method. You have said you want to use learner-centered method of teaching or teacher-centered method of teaching. Now, majority of them are old. They are far beyond you. You need to have techniques, and the technique could be the discussion, the role play. Then out of the techniques, you must have your strategy. Very important. The strategy is normally what we do in the classroom with the students. So, when you are late, don't enter my class and all that. These are strategies. They are not methods. They are not techniques. They are strategies. You are going to conduct a quiz and students are entering the class, but majority of them, they have dressed anyhow. So what do? You need to have a strategy. Very, very important. So the strategy is how we manipulate the techniques that we have chosen. How we manipulate the techniques that we have chosen. So as a would-be teacher or as a teacher, remember that you need to have a method, and the methods are the general ways in which we conduct whatever we will do in the classroom. Out of the methods, we have our techniques. The techniques are specific activities we do with our students. So, as I mentioned, it could be lecture technique, discussion, focus group, or whatever. Then, if you want to choose any particular technique, you need to have a strategy for you to achieve your objectives in the classroom. So you cannot say, as for me, I won't use a strategy. Everybody who teaches has a strategy. Sometimes the strategies that we use, for instance, you are going to write a quiz or you are going to conduct a quiz with your students, and you need to strategize. These people, if I joke, they will copy. So what do? These are the specific things that we do. So every teacher, in one way or the other, you are going to a classroom, you are tired, you need to have a strategy, because you cannot go and tell the students that, as for today, I'm very tired, so I'm going home. No. But in the class, you need to know how you are going to conduct yourself. So these are the specifics. So more or less, strategies are more specific than techniques. As for methods, they are the general ways that we conduct our classroom activities. And so if you are with us, you can join the discussion 0503-923158. 0503-923158. You can equally join us on our Facebook channel, Radio Windy Bay 98.3. You can phone in with your questions, your comments, and your contributions. Now, when we talk about methods, techniques, strategies, the last one is the scale of teaching. So from your methods, you get your techniques. From your techniques, you get your strategy. Then out of the strategy, you need to have a scale. So skills are more or less the competence in teaching effectively using the right methods, techniques, strategies, and resources. So there are instances that students will say, oh, this teacher, he cannot teach you. You call in the class, it's because that teacher lacks the skill of teaching. So skills are very important. And so how we organize our lesson plan, how we select our methods, how we select our resources, how we select even how to assess students' performance, teachers have to be skillful. If not, you set questions and everybody will get 10 over 10. But you need to have the skill. Even how to question and handle students' questions. There are instances students will ask you questions. These days that we have AI, students can just put in something and ask you, say, I read somewhere. That student has not read anywhere. You need to have that skill of handling students' responses. Even how to manage your classroom. Very difficult. Like I said, you go to a class, majority of them are older than you. How do you manage them? You need to be skillful. Some of them, they are queen mothers. Some of them, they are teachers. Some of them, they are parents. Some of them, they are chiefs in their villages. How would you tell that person that, hey, you, go and sit here? You need to be very skillful. So there are instances where you have to even walk to where the students are seated and talk to them. Please, can you go and sit somewhere? It is a skill. It is not a technique. It is not a method. It is not a strategy. It is a skill. So this morning we are talking about methods of teaching, and specifically we are looking at methods, techniques, strategies, and skills. So even how to use verbal means to communicate with your students. It is not everything that as a teacher you need to say openly. There are instances where even your eye would communicate to somebody. It is a skill. So once you look at the student, he will know, says I should keep quiet. Not knowing the person was not even ready to keep quiet, but because of the skill that you have. So skills are, or skill refers to one's ability or competence in teaching effectively. One's ability or competence in teaching effectively using the right methods, right techniques, right strategies, and right resources. So remember that our skill of teaching, from how we plan our lessons, how we question students, how we manage our classrooms, and how we even communicate. So how do we communicate? Through both verbal and non-verbal cues. There will be a time you wear black to class, students will know that today he's serious, something has happened, because colors communicate. These are skills. So as a teacher, you need to have the skill of teaching. And so both methods, techniques, and strategies are concepts that are related activities, even though they differ from one another in meaning. They are different, but they are all part of planning to enhance effective teaching and learning. They describe how a lesson is to be taught. So identifying the method, techniques, strategies for delivering a lesson is an indication of how skillful and ready a teacher is for a lesson. So as a teacher, all you need to know, or your students will identify you based on the methods, based on the techniques, based on the strategy, and based on the skill that you use in the classroom. So we have activated the phone line 0503 923158. 0503 923158. You can phone in, you can send your comments or your questions through our Facebook comment section, Radio Windy Bay 98.3, and we will gladly respond to this. Now, as I said, whether to teach with teacher-centered approach or learner-centered approach, you cannot say it is bad. No. People feel ideally we should use learner-centered method of teaching, but it depends on what you are going to teach. It depends on the kind of students that you have. It depends on their prior knowledge. It depends on the class size. For instance, if you are teaching 800 students and you want to have group discussion, how many groups are you going to create? So it means that whenever, as a teacher, even in the university, if you have a lecture and you are going to use a particular method, you need to consider the size of the class and so on and so forth. That's why I said earlier that methods of teaching are only two. We have teacher-centered method and learner-centered method. As for the teacher-centered method, you can sometimes refer to it as the transmission method. The transmission method, or the banking method, or the direct method. Here, the teacher takes a central role in the teaching and learning situation. And you realize that the teacher dominates the teaching and learning process by telling students what they need to know. So when it comes to the teacher-centered method of teaching, the attention is more on what is taught rather than the learner being taught. So everything is hijacked by the teacher. He dictates what students must know, what they shouldn't know, and so on and so forth. Like I said, you can refer to it as the banking method or the direct method of teaching. Many teachers tend to use the teacher-centered method for three main reasons: to cover a large area of knowledge in order to prepare learners for examinations. So you are in a school, students are about to write WASI, you have not finished the curriculum or the syllabus as you want. What do? You have to use the teacher-centered method of teaching to provide information otherwise not available to learners. So you go to a school, the students do not have textbooks. So when you decide to use learner-centered method, they don't have the books. So what do? As a teacher, you have to use the teacher-centered method of teaching. Lastly, to introduce new knowledge which may not be available to the students, or you need to, so you go to a school, you are going to tell them, you are going to teach them about the planet. These are students from our village. They've not heard the word planet before. What must you do? You need to introduce the new knowledge that you have for your students. So you must first come in before later you can organize them into groups. And so as for teacher-centeredness, like I said, it is not bad, but it depends on the purpose. And the purpose could be when you want to cover a large area within a short period of time, when you want to provide information otherwise not available to students, and when you want to introduce new knowledge to your students. And so we are still waiting for your phone calls, 0503923158. Our Facebook is also available. Those listening to us, I'm sure we are just going to Facebook to see if you have sent your comments, your contributions, and all that, so we can respond appropriately. And so there are some assumptions. Hello. I'm sure we have a caller on the line. Hello. 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 And so I'm sure the Facebook will work for us. So you can send your comments, your contributions, and all that. But remember that the moment you want to use the teacher-centered method of teaching, it means that you think the students have no knowledge, the students are very passive, and that knowledge can be or could be gained by passive transfer. Teachers know what learners need to learn. Hello.
I'm up with Ebenezer from Integrated Science Education.
Okay, Maxwell.
Please, I want you to differentiate between skills of teaching and then strategies of teaching for me.
All right, thank you very much.
I didn't get that, please.
All right, I'll do so. Thank you. And so, techniques of teaching, we said they are the specific things that teachers do to realize their objectives or to achieve their objectives. So, as for techniques, you may say you want to use discussion, focus group. But whenever you decide to use focus group, you need to have a strategy. So how am I going to group them? Are they going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? These are strategies. But when it comes to skills, we are saying that even when you have decided that you are going to group them 4, 5, you need to be skillful. So we all drive. But we have some drivers that you see and know this one, he knows the skill of driving. Because skills are more specific. As for strategy, let me move to this side of the road. Let me park here. These are strategies. But when you are using any strategy, you need to have a particular skill that you are going to use to implement your strategy. And so we are talking about assumptions, and we are saying that when you assume that all learners learn in the same way, all learners have the same learning needs, students are passive, students have no knowledge, then whether we like it or not, we have to use the teacher-centered method of teaching. Remember that when it comes to the teacher-centered method of teaching, the teacher selects what the learner will learn, the techniques, the strategies, and even the pace of learning. Teacher teaches all the time and does not allow learners to learn on their own. We have all witnessed that before. The teacher will not even allow you to ask questions. Learners are regarded more or less as tabula rasa rather than individuals with diverse needs, interests, talent, and abilities. So in all this that we're talking about, remember that when you are using the teacher-centered method of teaching, it saves time as all learners will be exposed to new knowledge which they learn at the same time. It saves time. So instead of grouping them, for somebody will come and no, you will just teach and go away if you want to save time. Remember we said, assuming all students are supposed to write WASI and you have covered up to unit 3 or unit 4, the only option that you have is to use the the teacher-centered method of teaching. It will save time. You can cover a large portion of the notes within a short time. So the teacher has control of the teaching and learning situation, which helps to maintain good classroom management. Learners are exposed to new knowledge in a uniform manner. So when you use the teacher-centered method of teaching, we are saying that there is no way a learner can come to you and say, in my group they said, no, I taught all of you together. Therefore, you shouldn't have variations. That's why I said it is not bad for you to use teacher-centered method or learner-centered method. It depends on the intention. If you want to cover a large portion of knowledge, if you want to save time, then the teacher-centered method of teaching is very important. But remember, when you decide to use the teacher-centered method, the learners will be passive. Learners will be more passive. They will be listeners, and they will not be directly involved or participate in the lesson. And the lessons are always planned according to the teacher's wishes, interests, and abilities. So we have all passed through the hands of those teachers. It is always them, because once you decide to use the teacher-centered method, remember that everything depends on you as a teacher. So your wish or your wishes, your interest, and your ability will determine what students learn, and not necessarily based on what the students may want to learn. Learners with difficulties may be behind, while bright ones are slowed down because of the need to have the whole class follow. So once you decide, okay, I think we have some comments from our Facebook. Good morning, sir. I'm Sifas from Geography Level 200. Of late, attention and focus is mostly placed on learner-centered than teacher-centered. Does that mean the former is better? Like I said earlier, it's what you are going to teach, the time you have at your disposal, the resources available, that will determine which of them you should use. None of them is bad, please. Akpene for a route. Please, my question is, can a teacher use a method without a technique, but a strategy or strategize? No. Once you decide in the classroom, you have a method. You cannot say, I don't have a method. There is always a method. You cannot say, I don't have a technique. You should always have a technique. But out of them, you need to have your strategies. So please, calling your students by their name is a skill of teaching, right? It's not a strategy. It can be a strategy, and it can be a skill. Because once I don't know my students, how do I group them? So we can say it is a skill that every teacher, or it is a strategy that every teacher must know the students by their names. I've gotten to understand these types of instruction in the classroom. Okay, thank you. Please, my question is, how does instructional techniques relate to teaching techniques in terms of effective teaching? So you can call them instructional techniques, you can call them techniques of teaching. They are all the same thing. Okay. All right. Adade have someone. Thank you very much. The intentional KWAKYE. Hey, stop it. This is a strategy, not a skill. Thank you. Sandra Ajeke from Integrated Home Economics. I'm enjoying the lecture. Thank you very much. And so all we are saying is that you can have, as for methods, you can have only two: teacher-centered method and learner-centered. As for techniques, we cannot teach you all the techniques. They are just like the scale of teaching. We cannot teach you all the scale of teaching. So some techniques of the teacher-centered method could be lecture, drill and practice, questioning and answer, whole class discussion, teacher-led demonstration, and so on and so forth. We will defer the learner-centered method to our various lecture theaters. And so this morning we spoke about methods, techniques, and strategies of teaching. Thank you very much for joining us. God willing, we will come your way with another segment a week today. Bye-bye.
This is Radio Windy Bay, Windy Bay 98.3 FM.